Warning: the following episode discusses intense topics of physical, psychological, and sexual abuse, addiction, mental health issues, and suicide. If this is something you are not in the right mental space for, please do not proceed with the video. Take care of yourself. Visit the links in the description. You are loved and you are valuable. Hello, fellow coffee consumers and crime connoisseurs. Welcome to the 9th episode of Mugshot Mornings, where we explore true crime one sip at a time. As always, I'm your host, Sydney. Today, I have a very special guest joining us later on in the podcast, but let me give a brief introduction into something pretty intense that we will be talking about today. We will be discussing the problematic issues of the troubled teen industry. In this episode, we are diving deep into the societal issues that demand our attention. Imagine that you are a teenager. You are already trying to figure out the challenges of adolescence, dealing with developing mental problems, only to find yourself entrapped in a system that claims to help you, but instead subjects you to abuse, neglect, and trauma. This is the reality for far too many young people who are placed in these so-called troubled teen programs. These programs are often marketed as therapeutic-styled boarding schools, wilderness camps, or residential treatment centers and claim to provide troubled youth with the structure and support they need to overcome their issues. Behind the glossy brochures and promises of transformation lies a highly disturbing truth. Many countless reports and testimonials have exposed the rampant abuse and exploitation that occurs within these facilities. From physical and emotional abuse to forced labor and isolation, the experiences that these unsuspecting vulnerable teenagers face are absolutely horrifying. Many of the programs employ coercive and manipulative tactics that strip young people of their autonomy and dignity. Instead of receiving the help they need, they are subjected to further trauma, which leaves lasting scars on their mental health. The effects of this industry extend far beyond the individual level, perpetuating cycles of abuse and trauma that ripple through families and communities. It is a multi-million-dollar industry that was built on the suffering of vulnerable youth, and it is time to be held accountable. Later in the episode, I am joined by a victim of the troubled teen industry. We will hear her survival story and discuss why shutting down these abusive facilities is not just necessary, but morally imperative. But, of course, before we go hard into this discussion, as always, we got some coffee that we got to talk about. This is my first 7 brew. This is my hello? This is my first 7 brew coffee. Not ever, but for the episode, or for the podcast. So I know that I just gave a pretty intense introduction, but we gotta talk about our coffee. We gotta give a little break, explain, give some updates and everything before we get into something pretty intense to talk about. Okay, so I did get an iced blondie with oat milk, one of my favorites from 7 Brew, but I got it half sweet because, good lord, y'all, 7 Brew is like almost just as bad as Dunkin' when it comes to the end. Oh, I'm looking at myself. When it comes to the intensity of sweetness, I don't even know how to. Why are words hard today? I don't even know how to begin to explain the sweetness of an iced blondie. The other day, I got a sweet and salty. Oh my god, that was a good mouthful. The other day I got a sweet and salty. That was really good, but that one is actually good with it being sweet. When I got it half sweet, I was actually really like, okay, this doesn't taste any good. And also, something's going on with my espresso machine. I tried making a coffee for the past 4 days, and it's coming out really, really, really watery. Like I'm getting water and oat milk. And that's it. I'm not getting any coffee taste. If anyone knows how to fix that, please let me know because I'm not having a good time. But anyways, this iced blondie is like freaking hitting that spot, bro. It is freaking hitting that spot. Updates. Literally nothing has happened to me this past week at all. I have a very boring life. I sit down, I do this, I'm in school, and I go to work. I play pickleball. Wow, that's really sad. I can't even explain like literally anything else. Great. Great. I guess we could just go ahead and get into the story because I know that this one's going to be really long. I did the interview yesterday. I did not have time to film and then do the interview. And also I have backup batteries coming from my camera, so that way I can film for longer periods. Thank the Lord. I'm excited about that. This will be my longest episode probably ever. Oh, at least right now. Anyways, so let's get into today's discussion, today's story. So the troubled teen industry actually does stem from a cult, believe it or not. Not really hard to believe, I guess, actually. But so just to give a brief summary of what the troubled teen industry is, it's basically parents who believe that their children are suffering from severe mental health symptoms or what they call acting out, so defiant behavior. They will ship them off to a whole nother state to be rehabilitated. It could also even be substance abuse addiction as well. So these treatment programs are a multi-billion-dollar industry, and you might think it's because they want the children to get the help, get rehabilitated. You would think that that was the main premise of why these parents are shipping off their children. So that's absolutely incorrect. These adolescents don't even know that their parents have spiked up this plan to send them away. In order for these children to be involuntarily transported to these treatment facilities, they are often woken up in the middle of the night by complete strangers who use intense physical force to throw them in a van and haul them away, which in its entirety is legal kidnapping. But before I dive deep more into the children aspect and what it is modernized as today, we need to talk about how it all started and the origins of the beliefs of the troubled teen industry. The origins can be traced back to the 1960s to a cult named Synanon. Now, Synanon can be a whole video by itself, but I'm going to try and tie in the two today, since this basically is, like, the troubled teen industry literally is a cult and stemmed from a cult, but we're going to tie them in today just for the sake of the reasoning as to what happened to the teen industry, because this has been something that I think that besides the questions that I had written for the guests later on, I think I wrote this about 4 months ago, so I've had this on lock for a while. So this later to be cult had a focus on drug rehabilitation centers that used attack therapy, isolation, limited freedom, and rewards for compliance. It was founded by Charles E. Diedrich, or Charles, in Santa Monica, California. The word Synanon was created by the combination of two words, symposium and seminar. I have also read that it also could have stemmed from Alcoholics Anonymous too, otherwise known as AA. That's another source that said an addict had slurred words together of seminar, symposium together. Either way, the word Synanon was created. Now, a quick summary of Charles. He was born in Toledo, Ohio in 1913 and had a pretty hard childhood. His father died in a car crash, and when his mom remarried only a few years later, Charles started drinking heavily just at the ripe age of 12. His drinking habits made a few marriages of his fail, and what is known to maybe have sparked the formation cult of Synanon was when one of his ex-wives called him fatso and told him that if he didn't go to AA, Alcoholics Anonymous, he would die. So Charles went to AA every single day in Santa Monica, California, and he was one of the favorite speakers at AA. He was very well known in the meetings. He devoted so much time and energy to AA that he ended up quitting his job so that he could help clean up other alcoholics as his full-time job. He put many hours into alcoholic research, and he gained his own following from members of AA. Charles's face had also been paralyzed due to meningitis, which left him with a tic and a constant sneered expression. But he was very witty and honest despite his overall intimidating appearance. Charles started to really help people in AA by nicely bullying them to get sober. At this point, Charles was living on welfare, sleeping in homeless shelters, and he could not afford any meals or shelter himself, but he was sober and happy to help people too. In 1957, the University of California was studying the new drug LSD and needed volunteers to study therapeutic uses for it. Charles really needed the money, so he volunteered to be a human experiment for this study. Other people experienced hallucinations, while Charles explained that he only felt feelings of omnipotence and omniscience and believed he was a higher power. So before Synanon, he initially started something called the Tender Loving Care Club, so TLC Club. Charles started this to be a safe space for drug addicts and alcoholics. He scraped what little cash he had and rented out an old store for them to hold meetings at. These seminars he held would be hours long. When I stated earlier that he bullied people into being sober, I literally mean he bullied people into getting sober. He would ridicule them, tease them, and it somehow worked. At Synanon, TLC Club, Synanon now, Charles created what was called the game. And the game consisted of these addicts sitting in a circle, and one person would verbally abuse someone. They would talk about their appearance or their character, and as soon as that person tried to defend themselves, anyone else could chime in. After that person felt so small and so broken, they would admit that they were wrong, say they would change, and then the process would start over to a new person. The game took place 3 times a week in the TLC building. There was also hard labor that was mandatory, like laundry, dishes, painting, etc. There were classes in art, drama, music, and they even created an album. Their group was also self-policed, meaning everyone in there was basically snitches. You had to tell on someone else you saw that did something wrong, and if you didn't, you had to enter the game. Now, outside of the game, you had to be polite and civil with everyone, but inside of the sessions, people were encouraged to say the worst things about a person and be as critical and profane as they wanted to be. Now, keep in mind that Charles did not have a therapy background, so obviously these tactics are very unethical and not founded on any basis of evidence-based practices. He would tell members of the group that these tactics were very helpful, not harmful or malicious in any way. What began as a community of recovering addicts who just wanted help quickly turned to something more dark and malicious. This program was initially set as a 2-year residential program, but of course, Charles wanted to expand Synanon to gain a larger community and following. Now, this is typically how all cults start and end. The program expanded to multiple treatment centers and a residential school that primarily targeted the addict community. This school accepted dropouts, neurodiverse individuals, or anyone who was mandated to attend through the California court system. Large corporations and businesses started donating to their cause, and the program that originally started with just $33 was now making over $10 million a year. By 1964, just 6 years after the group began, Synanon faced scrutiny for alleged unauthorized medical practices. Which, yeah, like I literally just explained that. Hey, don't literally verbally abuse people into getting them to be sober. It actually, I think, is known to have opposite effects. I could just be making that up, though. By 1968, it extended its rehabilitation program indefinitely, arguing addicts couldn't fully recover. Evading taxes, it rebranded as the Synanon religion and prolonged its intense game sessions to 72 hours. By the 1970s, it morphed into a cult, enforcing head shaving, coercing invasive procedures including abortions and vasectomies, and even breaking up relationships. Initially a non-violent group, Charles established the Imperial Marines to enforce order within and outside of the community. However, members were subjected to mental manipulation, torture, and even were prohibited from leaving. Many individuals who escaped faced severe beatings, with one former member nearly beaten to death with a fractured skull in 1977. A lawyer named Paul Morantz, who defended many escaped ex-members, filed a lawsuit against the group, and Charles sent the Imperial Marines to put a rattlesnake in Paul's mailbox. In 1978, Charles was arrested for, ironically, a DWI, and was no longer allowed to have any further leadership in the group. By 1991, the Synanon group had eventually dissolved, and they no longer had any funding, and Charles eventually died in 1997 at 83 years old. The legacy of Synanon's game persists in various forms of abusive therapy across decades in facilities like the Elan School, the Family School, Hidden Lake Academy, and Spring Ridge Academy. These programs subject students to relentless psychological and physical abuse, often under the disguise of therapeutic exercises. Survivors recount enduring public humiliation, forced confessions, and emotional manipulation. Such practices continue to harm individuals and lack evidence of therapeutic efficacy. It is basically a cycle of trauma that was perpetuated by outdated and harmful methods. So, Synanon created a lot of controversial groups and has impacted them in really hurtful ways. Two well-known celebrities who are survivors of the now troubled teen industry would be Paris Hilton and Danielle Bregoli, otherwise known as Bad Baby. In the United States alone, there are approximately 10,000 troubled teen facilities and about 100,000 youth in these facilities. These are inpatient facilities for troubled youth, as I had stated earlier. It is almost like a beyond scared straight type of thing, but also not, because it's not really for kids going to jail who are acting out and committing crimes. It's mainly kids who struggle with maybe addiction or are starting to develop mental health symptoms, and their parents want them to get help. But it almost has the vibe of Beyond Scared Straight. And if y'all don't know what that is, it's basically, I've only seen like a couple episodes. I know I should actually watch it, but Beyond Scared Straight is kids go to adult prisons, and these prisoners who are trying to educate the kids, like, you don't want to come here, can just scream at them, make them feel so uncomfortable to make the kids be like, oh, I actually don't ever want to go to prison. I don't know if that's actually effective. It probably is, but I haven't seen any of the episodes, so that's why I'm saying that. Now, many articles that I have read, along with just, I guess, my degree, I do have a degree in psychology. I have a master's degree in psychology, actually. These practices and these facilities are very ineffective and very damaging due to the physical and sexual and psychological abuse that these children who are sent to these facilities go through. A lot of these troubled teens or kids who are acting out, its premise is basically almost inherently parental and environmental factors. Some of these are just parents who are really strict and they have a lot of learned behaviors from their parents. And many times the teens aren't even acting out. They just have depressive episodes and the parents just don't want to deal with them. It's truly disgusting. Now, I did mention earlier that this is basically legal kidnapping. Parents will give permission for these people to come and bind their children while they are sleeping, blindfold them, and when they wake up and have their blindfold taken off, they are hundreds of miles away from their family at an unknown facility. Now, I don't even want to go into the long-term effects that specific incident alone can have on a child. Like, I've read where if their blindfold was able to be off as they were exiting the driveway, they could see their parents watching them drive away. And it doesn't look like they're frantic. It doesn't look like they're on the phone with police saying, like, someone's, like, come and got my kid. And this isn't every single time. Not every kid is kidnapped and taken. I say kidnapped because it is. Not every kid is kidnapped. Some of them know that they're going to these because some of these are based as a boarding school, and they have discussed this with their parents, and their parents really do truly just want to get help for their kid. It's not that they are not wanting to deal with them, but I can't even imagine being kidnapped and your parents are behind it. These facilities also con and manipulate parents into thinking that they are sending their children who are going to be protected and loved and disciplined, and creating their children to become really good Samaritans. But again, it is basically legalized child abuse that is formed as therapy, or not formed, that is disguised as therapy. According to the Troubled Teen Industry website, since 1976, 315 children died while they were in these troubled teen programs due to various reasons. Some deaths were caused by restraint, medical neglect, suicide, escape attempts, overdose, and much more. Paris Hilton, who went to Provo Canyon School at 17 years old in Utah, explained her experiences of physical, emotional, and sexual abuse. Now, this really stemmed from her documentary, This is Paris, in 2020. In her documentary, she detailed the abuse that she suffered at this school where she was sent as a teenager. She described being subjected to physical and emotional abuse, including forcibly restrained, placed in solitary confinement, and enduring verbal insults. The documentary helped bring national attention to this issue, thankfully. But following the release of this documentary, Paris became actively involved and an advocate in the reform of the troubled teen industry, because it really could be very beneficial. The modernized part of it and the ones that are still open today are not at all the way that it's supposed to be ran. Paris also had explained that she did suffer sexual abuse. She was strangled, slapped across the face, and she even had to be watched by a male member while she showered. So Danielle Bergoli, who is also very famous, she was sent to Dr. Phil's infamous Turnabout Ranch that's also located in Utah, and she shared her experiences as well. So Danielle Bergoli, also known by her stage name as Bad Baby, is an American rapper, and she's first well known in September 2016 when she was on Dr. Phil's show. Now, this show was a segment titled, I Want to Give Up My Car-Stealing, Knife-Wielding, Twerking 13-year-old Daughter Who Tried to Frame Me for a Crime. And she became really well known for her catchphrase, catch me outside, how about that? Which became a viral meme, whatever, everybody knows that. Now, following this segment and whatever on Dr. Phil, Danielle, Bad Baby, was sent to Turnabout Ranch, which is a troubled teen facility located in Utah that is ran specifically by Dr. Phil. And in 2021, a very famous YouTube video, I'll link down in the description, where Bad Baby talks about this facility that she was at. She spoke out against the ranch, alleging that she was being really mistreated there. Danielle's allegations included claims of being forced to stay awake for long periods of time, physical restraint, and other forms of abuse. Her accusations are part of a broader controversy surrounding the troubled teen industry, which includes various residential treatment centers, therapeutic boarding schools, and wilderness programs aimed at helping troubled adolescents. Now, many people argue that these programs engage in abusive practices and lack proper regulation and can cause more harm than good to the teens that they are supposed to help, which, yes. Danielle has since also, like Paris, used her platform to advocate to reform the industry. Danielle also gave details that staff mistreated the kids that she was with every single day and would take away their shower rights and sleeping arrangements, such as a bed, and would often withhold food from them. Danielle also, I had said, she witnessed one of the kids at the camp murder a staff member while stealing a car to escape the camp, and none of the teenagers were offered any emotional support afterward. None of the teenagers are offered any emotional support, not even witnessing a murder, but experiencing abuse themselves. I don't even want to understand the psychological torture that some of these kids go through, because I never will truly understand ever. So now, the troubled teen industry does have a long and complex history, like I said, dating back to Synanon, and it's really difficult to pinpoint the first facility that was opened up specifically for troubled youth, but there's also reform schools and juvenile detention centers that have existed since the late 19th and early 20th century. These institutions were originally designed to reform delinquent youth and provide them with education and vocational training. However, these facilities were plagued by reports of abuse and harsh treatment. So we have Synanon. We also have something called the Seed, that is another early facility treatment that was founded by Art Baker in Florida in 1970. And that's another controversial treatment program that was explained for troubled youth. They used intense methods like the game that was used similar by Synanon. They did face significant criticism and they did eventually shut down, but there are still many others that are open, including the Provo Canyon School that Paris Hilton went to, many others. We know that there are hundreds in the United States. Let me look that up. What is the exact number? So I said hundreds. Okay, in the United States, as of 2022, there are over 10,000 programs within the troubled teen industry. Now, because of the troubled teen industry, many survivors who have not succumbed to their mental health problems and went down a path of addiction, mental health problems, including suicidal ideation and eventually suicide. Many people have been missing, and there has been a lot of advocacy within the past few years, including something called Breaking Code Silence, which is a movement and organization dedicated to raising awareness about the abuses and mistreatment within the troubled teen industry. Now, this organization works to educate the public about the widespread abuse in the troubled teen industry, including survivor stories, conducting research, and just explaining information through various social media channels. And it provides a platform for survivors to share their experiences and often connect with others who have gone through similar experiences. Many of these facilities, or otherwise known as teen concentration camps, are located in the state of Utah, including a facility called Uinta Academy, where our guest, Claire Seale, will be discussing her experiences at this facility. Guys, I'm so excited. We have Claire joining us in just a few moments. So we are going to be over Zoom, so the audio quality for her may not be the best, but I'm still learning how to do something like this, since this is the first time that I am doing something like this, and I'm very excited. I just want to explain in the beginning that this is a different day. I don't have enough time to sit down and film for the rest, so I know that I look a bit different than at the beginning of the video. I do want to address a few things. The first thing is that this is something that's going to be pretty traumatic for her to talk about, and I'm not entirely sure if she has done any type of reprocessing or anything. That is something that I do have. I'm going to be asking, like, has she ever received therapy for this as well? Just asking y'all to please be kind in the comments whenever it comes to Claire and her experience. This is something that is probably going to be really hard for her to talk about, and I'm very thankful that she's coming on here to even discuss this with me, because I after researching everything, I genuinely can't imagine going through what she has went through. So please, y'all, if y'all are in the comments and y'all have anything negative to say, please don't say anything. This is something really hard. And I don't have anybody mean in my comments, but I guess I'm saying for like future people who see this video later, future subscribers, people who aren't subscribed, just please just, be mindful of what you're saying. This is somebody opening up and being very vulnerable when discussing something so traumatic for them. So I know that y'all won't, but I appreciate y'all just being kind in the comments, and I hope you guys enjoy the interview. Okay. So, now that everything's working, it was messing up I think because of my microphone. So I've kind of already filmed over basically explaining how this started. Basically this was a cult created called Synanon. Do you know about that?
Yes, but I haven't gone, like, crazy in depth about all of it. Yeah, I mean, I know I saw the documentary. Oh, what was it called? Yeah, and then that's about the extent I know was the documentary about the troubled teen industry that just came out probably a few months ago. I don't know why I'm blanking on the name now, but yeah.
So I guess we will just easily start off with what's your name, where you're from, like what's a brief introduction before we like get into the nitty-gritty.
Yeah, I'm Claire. I am from Little Rock, Arkansas. I'm currently living in Fayetteville, and I'm starting school in the fall for mental health counseling. And yeah, yeah,
Uh,
well, it all circles back in some way.
yeah. We talked about that you were at a facility in Utah. So what was that facility and how long were you there for?
So this facility was called Uinta Academy in Wellsville, Utah, is the predominant campus. And then there's also some in Idaho as well that you kind of the transition home that you move out of. But anyways, I was there for a whole year from December to December. I got dropped off on Christmas Eve of 2014 and then graduated that next year around the same time, 2015.
So you graduate the facility, like you don't just get to go on good behavior?
No, you have a there it's just a point system, and you have like, basically what you would do in kindergarten or something to go to the treasure chest, but, like, your treasure chest is your freedom, and you have a points card system that you have every day, and you would be working on 4 select skills from a book. My certain skills were always, like, follow or accept feedback, assertive versus aggressive, because sometimes I'm kind of blunt. And there's a few others, and you would have to earn a certain amount of points that day to be able to have your privileges, which was talking to people in the house, eating a snack, being able to watch TV, writing. And if you don't make your privileges, you are basically doing chores and you're isolated from the whole house. And that's what we call that no privs. But you work your way every day through that point system, but you can get in the hole. So if you got a really huge consequence, one time I got a really big consequence because I dropped a hay bale onto a rake, and it took me like 3 days to get out of the hole. Whereas for me, I was mostly there for kind of depression and not as much behavioral issues. It was easy for me to just shut up and follow the system. Whereas for most of the other girls who struggle, either they're on the spectrum or they had ODD or whatever, they were there for a lot.
Okay, so yeah, that was actually my next question. Like, what was the reason that your parents had sent you to these facilities, along with like, were you willingly sent and you knew you were going, or were you like basically legally kidnapped by these transporters in the middle of the night, like some kids are, and
Right.
you know what was happening?
So I was not transported. I actually went to most people have some form of treatment before they enter a longer term boarding school. So my first go around was my freshman year. I went to eating disorder rehab for 3 months battling anorexia. And that was actually, it's called Eating Recovery Center in Denver. The first go around I was there, it was actually really good. It's really healing. They have a lot of science back behind things, like really good art therapy and lots of I that was a healing process. But I came back home. I went through I well, I had sexual trauma as a kid, And so then I kind of had all of that re-triggered in between my freshman and sophomore year that summer. There was another incident, and that had kind of led me into a really deep depression. And so my parents decided to send me to back to the same eating recovery center. And I was fully I was there for 2 months. At this point, kind of where my parents realized it was more than just an eating disorder, like there was some trauma that needed to be dealt. I hadn't really ever talked about it before up until then. And so I'm there, and the way that program is you spend 2 months inpatient, and then your third month is outpatient. You live with your parents in the city somewhere in Denver. So it comes to the end of that second month, and I'm thinking, okay, my mom or my dad or my grandma is about to come up and stay with me so we can work on transitioning back into my life.
Yeah.
And that is when they told me that I was going to be going to Utah to boarding school.
This was not the same academy that you were at in Utah. This was a completely different facility.
This was a completely different facility. Yeah. This was an inpatient eating disorder rehab.
Okay,
I
that's
don't
right.
know if that's, I mean, it's probably is considered the troubled teen industry there. But they're kind of ethical for the most part. I definitely had my fair share of problems there the second go around, but that was mostly because I did not want to go to boarding school. Like I had heard of these boarding schools not being good,
Yeah.
that people disappear and don't come back or whatever. And so I begged my parents, like, please, can I just go live with like my aunt, or can I go live with my grandparents? Because at this point I'm a sophomore in high school, so it was only going to be a few more years. Or I was like, can I even transfer high schools? I begged. But because I didn't, the people who are typically transported are the teens who go at it with more defiance, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
Um, I just kind of succumbed and was like, well, what am I going to do at this point? Like, I have nowhere to go because, like, you can't run away. So, my parents actually are the ones who dropped me off at the front door. We flew from Denver to Utah.
Yeah, I the more that I've read about it, the more like people were literally like, because it's literally legal, and it's insane to read about people being like, I was like thrown into a car and watched my parents watch me because I was being
Yeah,
driven away. I mean, obviously this is still really sad, but do you have like a relationship with your parents still? Like, have you
I
rekindled
do.
a relationship
I
with them?
do. I think they're coming around to accepting it all, but obviously they're very much in denial that I went to a place that was so kind of mentally abusive. And for me, there, I did not suffer any sexual or physical abuse, but I was constantly around it and seeing it with my peers and them going through everything. So it was kind of more of a bystander, not being able to speak up for my friends and knowing that, like, they, I mean, a lot of them weren't even able to communicate how they needed to be treated. But my parents and I do have a good relationship. They watched the documentary last year, or a few months ago, and they apologized. But in general, I think something that has become misconstrued throughout the movement, in my opinion, is that, like, it's a lot of it's not the parents' fault. You think about it, most of these parents who send their kids there are desperate and they are literally have no idea what to do. Their kid is suicidal, depressed, like not eating, and they just trust the advice of, they have these things called, but it's basically like representatives to set you and to help place a teen somewhere. And so they came in and, toured my parents at all these facilities. And like you walked into Uenta, my parents told me about this, and they get like the two best girls that are like playing piano and like greeting you so kindly, and then the horses, and it is beautiful. It's Utah. And like e- I mean, it's a major like marketing ploy. Like that is exactly what it was, and they fell for it. And I no longer had a voice to speak up. As soon as I stepped foot that door, mom and dad, get me out of here.
So, did you get to continue speaking with them in any way? Like, do you have any contact with anyone that you knew the year that you were there?
Yes, with my parents. I was able to talk to them on the phone twice a week for 15 minutes, and that was monitored. So there was a staff member there in the room the whole time.
So what was like the day-to-day like life like? Did you still go to school, like still receive an education, or was like some extracurricular activities? Like what was like day-to-day life?
So by paper, it looks like we had a normal day-to-day life, but so we would wake up super early around like 6 a.m. You would either be on night feeding or morning feeding routine. And we would go out into this giant muddy corral of untrained horses and feed the horses. Like we would lift up the bales, carry them, 100 yards, put them in there. I mean, it's Utah, so it's freezing cold. It's 6 in the morning. You're dying. Or you were on cleaning duty, which is every week you would be in charge of you would have a job. So you would either be a cook or you'd be in charge of the laundry room or the office or the bedrooms, and you had to clean the baseboards, deep clean every single morning and night. And the staff members would come around after we finished everything that morning and would like kind of just touch the baseboards and be like, "Oh, negative 5,000, you have dust on there." And you're like, "Well, the girls just went in here and changed clothes." And like, it's we were like basically slaves. Like in many ways, we were the reason this industry is so profitable is because the workforce is predominantly the kids. We cook the food. So if you were in charge of cooking, you would you went to the market once a week. We would all get these vans. If you had your privileges, you were allowed to go to the market. And we would but we had to keep it under $200. And the servings were 20 kids or 20 servings for breakfast, lunch, dinner, and two snacks, under $200. So we ate only canned fruits and vegetables. Like that's not even back, prior to the inflation that we've had the past, whatever, 8 years. Like nobody was ever meeting that budget. Like, and if we were, it was because we were eating hardly any portions or crap food. But my parents are paying crazy out of the pocket for this, and we are the ones who are cooking. So obviously, I went there for an eating disorder. So the food thing, I'll come back to that a lot because that was like probably the biggest medical abuse that I had was that they would punish me by not eating when I just dealt with anorexia, you know?
Premise of me being here is because of this.
Exactly. And so we would do that, and then we would go to school, which was basically the garage above the garage. It's this room. We had computers, but they didn't have internet on them. They would have these downloaded like lesson plans, but we would have one teacher that would come in from, I guess, like the local schools that would like volunteer to do it once a week. But we were all just teaching ourselves, like, with paper. I got extremely behind in school. So before I went to Uinta, I went to a college prep school. It was very rigorous, in Little Rock, and so it was a difficult transition for me to go from really being fulfilled educationally to going to teaching myself chemistry. Like, because obviously the staff members who are there, other than the one teacher who's tending to 25 girls who are all doing different lesson plans, we didn't learn anything. We didn't learn anything at all. So when I also went into college right after school, right after Uinta, I was very behind, which is a major problem. I know for other girls too, that they didn't even get accredited high school education and had to go take their GED and stuff from there.
I actually was gonna ask, like, do you still keep in touch with any of the girls that you were with? And like, was it strictly girls or was it co-ed? Like, were boys and girls separated or it was only girls?
It was just girls. So there were 3 houses there, or 4, I guess, and they each had about 17 to 20 girls there. And yeah, we still keep in touch. I not as much day to day, but it's kind of been an anomaly to see whenever Paris Hilton kind of started speaking out, how we all realized, "Oh my god, like we went through a lot." Like I think that was the first time that we were like, "Wait, this was really." We knew it was up, but like no one had ever put the words to it. In the past few years, we've all kind of rekindled and talked and been like, yeah, you remember when this happened? You remember that? Like, that was crazy. Like, so we're in kind of a Facebook group, and then some of us will keep in touch, but we have lost a lot of girls. Like, a lot of girls are missing. We don't know where they are, or we've
It
had a few overdose. I can personally say that it was very traumatizing, but I am a white straight girl. So things were a lot easier for me than they were for my peers.
So was it predominantly white people, or there were like other races and ethnicities? And
There's other races, other religions. I would say, I don't know this for a fact, but I mean, we're in Mormon country. Like, I would say predominantly 90% of our staff were Mormon. Every race and every practicing religion being under Mormon, underlying Mormon control, basically, because the staff members are like our age now. They're like in their early 20s and early undergrad. Like, they don't know how to take care of us. Like, I couldn't say that a lot of us are doing that great. Like, one of the biggest things that has come out with talking with my friends from treatment is how many of my friends were queer in many different ways, and now that they basically were told there that they were not allowed to, if they felt that they were a man, they had to wear female clothes, and they had to cut their hair, or they had to let their hair grow. Like, those are the girls, and the thems and the theys and the he's and that went through it, that I like just can't imagine that identity that they had to be pressed. They were already having that problem at home, and then they had to go here. And so in many ways it was an underlying conversion camp as well.
yeah, I haven't mentioned whenever I was actually introducing you before, was that this was basically like a teen concentration camp. Like this
Yeah.
is like prison. And I mean, I watched the documentary as well, and that's like how they basically said it's just a prison for kids. It's not like a juvenile facility or anything like that.
But they profit.
Yeah,
Private, so they profit off of it.
you said that some are missing, some have overdosed, and I've seen that's actually pretty regular. Did you ever see? Because I know everybody knows the Daniel Bergoli story and the Paris Hilton story, but obviously
Yeah.
this is like a someone who is not a famous person in the media talking about their real life experiences. That those got pushed out more. Somebody witnessed someone pass away. Did you ever like witness someone like die while you were in these facilities?
No. But here's what happens. They wouldn't tell us. So we would go on this thing called fives. It's where every single staff member had to be in the room with whatever girl was going through the ringer at the time. And so every other girl who wasn't part of the debacle would be isolated, and we weren't allowed to talk. We just sit there, so we would hear the screams, the sirens, the whatever come. I had one girl who was actually my roommate multiple different times, and she just one night disappeared. Like, after a fives debacle, we have never found her again. Like, we try to track her down all the time. And she was my roommate. We had bunk beds, just me and her in that room at the time. Normally they were bigger rooms, but it was just me and her. And I had walked by, and she had like stabbed herself in the leg with a pencil. Immediately, a staff member comes running in, they call fives, and then she's gone. Like, we never saw her again. So we don't know if like maybe it did end up happening. We just don't know.
So it's fives like kind of like an intervention.
Yeah, and it's like it basically is like that's when they're restraining you. I've never been restrained, but I've seen so many girls be restrained.
I actually had a question. I know that you said that you didn't experience like any physical or sexual abuse, obviously, thankfully, but you did say that you did have some type of mental abuse. And I know obviously being there is just like mentally fucking exhausting. But what is like an example of like mental abuse that you went through?
I think really the biggest thing that I went through was watching all of the abuse around me. Medically, I think I was very mistreated, eating disorder wise. They to know how to treat an eating disorder, it is learning that food is nutritious. It keeps you alive. It should never be used as a punishment. There was only 3 or 4 of us that had eating disorders that the only reason we ever found that out was because we had to weigh like once every month this I guess to make sure that we weren't losing weight. We didn't have a nutritionist. We didn't have the proper treatment there. And they would actually show me how much I weighed, which is like a huge no-no. Like
Yeah,
I still don't look at how much I weigh.
yeah,
And
that's already unhealthy, but, like, I've watched some of these, or I've read some of these articles, watched some of these videos that pretty much every single person in this facility that has over hundreds of thousands of children are not licensed in any way to take care. They don't have enough training, enough knowledge to be taking care of the kids the way that they are being taken care of. And they they literally don't know what they're doing. So it's just all these random people who are just hired. And most of the time it's people who like kind of get a thrill and a joy of like being able to harm others without
yeah,
repercussions. Because obviously we've seen so many kids like have extreme trauma. Like you said, some are missing, some have overdosed, some have unfortunately committed like suicide, so many things and so much trauma. And it's just people that are like feeding off of this. They don't really care about these kids. It's literally just money.
no, it's literally money.
It's
Like
not.
we had a doctor, but we visited the doctor once your whole time there. And then the rest was over a FaceTime call every other month, I think. So you're having girls who are literally have lacerations and, self-harm stuff and everything, no nurses on staff. They would rarely take you to the hospital. Like, the only people who were qualified were the therapists who were LPCs or MSWs, and each student got to see them twice a week. And they were only there, what, like 8 to 5.
So they
And
can.
we actually found out or that they were testing drugs on an ADHD drug on all of the girls as well. They were testing out some sort of Alzheimer's drugs to see if it worked for ADHD. And I don't know the depth of if that was in, FDA approved or like we don't know. But like you obviously don't have any say on your medicine either, and your parents don't even know either. So most of these girls are like that drug made these girls zombies. So you
So
were getting in trouble for being tired and depressed and, like you're not keeping up with your chores or your hygiene and you're drugged up. Like it was a horrible cycle.
so it's really like human experiments. Just like I'm just going to give you this medication. Let's see the effects.
Yeah. Yeah.
Did you notice a difference of the way people treated whatever people came there for, like differences? So like you had struggled with an eating disorder. People struggle with behavioral and defiance and stuff like that. Did you notice a difference in the way that the staff would treat the different people?
Yes.
Struggle.
For sure. I mean, we had staff members who, were early undergrad psych majors who wanted experience on their resume and genuinely came from a good heart. And then there were the staff that you were mentioning. I mean, narcissistic tendencies and wanting to micromanage and almost be like a police officer with no backing. Like, and those were so hard on people of color and the people struggling with their queerness at the time, or not even allowed to express it because most of them were Mormon and that was against the Mormon beliefs. The girls who didn't struggle with oppositional issues, like we were treated way better. Like I was treated way better. And I can say that. Like I would never get in trouble. People would let things slide more if I, didn't like say or skip or no, accidentally left a pin in the washing machine. Whereas like my queer roommate would have gotten a negative 10,000. They just kind of let it slide for me. Like they would personally victimize and punish those girls. And I had to sit there and watch it happen. And if I said anything, I would have been there for 2 years. That was for me the hardest of like, because I am such a justice oriented person to be like, what are you guys doing? And the amount of girls who are on the spectrum now, we know that they're on the spectrum and they are getting punishments for not making eye contact or following instructions or not using the proper tone or, like things that are blatantly like not even like it's obvious. Like they can't do some of those things. And so they are literally like those are the girls too who struggled so hard. Those girls were definitely victimized too. Like Because like, I mean, these staff members, they could just sit there and whip out consequences all the time, you know?
Like, the whole point is for y'all to go and get, like, rehabilitated and get help and everything, and then you can't even get help. You can't even talk about the reason why you're there. You're a survivor and I feel like a very successful victim, compared to many people who just, like, fell to the abuse and the trauma that they, endured, but not saying that they can't be successful, but it doesn't seem like they're very effective in any way. Like,
Yeah. No, I agree, and that is why I feel the obligation to speak on the behalf of those who can not that are not alive, not here, that are gone, that cannot mentally there's some people who are like, "I never wanna think about that again." So, I mean, of course, they're struggling with drugs and abuse and dating horrible people, and but that is why even though we all were abused under the system, I was mentally capable enough to be like, "Okay, I know what to do. I'm gonna follow the rules and get out of here."
did you ever go to, like, therapy or get help, like, after?
Yes.
How long did it take you to be like, "Okay, I need to talk to someone about this"?
I think the biggest thing that Uinta did to me was teach me just how to gaslight myself and that my emotions were invalid. Because that was the whole thing. It was like a learn how to like function in society and your issues don't matter, hide them, like, So I never you would ask anybody about how I would about boarding school prior to the past few years, it would always be like, "Oh yeah, I went to boarding school." And they probably think it's like some prestigious, like pretty boarding school that like ID prep, but no. And so I just kind of avoided it and never talked about it for a really long time. As do I feel like most girls, that's kind of this process of they just don't talk about it. And by the grace of God, literally, like I have finally kind of met a therapist in the past 2 years that I have been doing brain spotting and EMDR with. We would even have like all day intensives going through all of this stuff, as well as all the trauma that led up to me coming there to begin with. So I feel like I have been able to process it so much more, but reliving it and also giving credit to myself that I went through that instead of ignoring it has been significantly healing as well. But it's funny how much I notice like little things that affect me. Like TMI, but like I will use the bathroom so quick because like we had to sing the whole time while we were in the bathroom and I had to like yeah, because I was eating disorder, they were afraid I was throwing up and I had to have the door open. So I would like so to this day I use the bathroom like this because it's just always been that way. And then like whenever I start cleaning, I feel like I can't just clean like just like a nice clean. It has to be a deep level clean, like I don't know. It's like I relive that trauma. And I notice little things like that all the time. I get deeply saddened whenever I see like my high school friends all be in the weddings together and be like, I should have been there, but my parent, like I got shipped off. Whenever anybody talks about prom, I'm like, yeah, that's great. I don't know anything about that. Like, there's just so many pivotal moments in life that I have been able to process through, but I continue to mourn losing my childhood every day.
Which, I mean, I understand that you're reprocessing that right now. So has therapy, like, been effective and, like, in helping? I mean, obviously, you'll always have that part of you. You'll always have something very tragic that happened. Like, I went through EMDR therapy for, something for me. And although it helps and it doesn't affect me in such a negative way like it used to, it's still a part of me, but
Yeah.
like I'm still living my life.
It's
So,
always something I'll have to battle, but it's not as big of a battle.
so I don't remember when exactly this started. I want to say it was right after. Did you graduate in 17 or 16?
17.
17. Okay, that's when
No,
I.
16, sorry.
This was. I think this was around the time Breaking Code Silence was coming out.
Mhm.
I don't remember exactly what year that was, but did you participate or were you kind of skeptical at first because of this being literally the first time that this was like being brought to light?
I didn't really hear about any of it until I found out about Paris, honestly, and that was, like, post-grad, like, I think it was during COVID, really, like, when I figured out about it. I think a lot of us just never really heard about it yet. No one was really posting about it. I think as soon as other survivors, just as like it was more when other survivors started speaking up, it was a trickle effect.
Yeah.
I was very encouraged by one of my classmates who did their thesis on Uinta and researched it, and they had such a great, and they did a podcast, and so that I was inspired. It's like a trickle effect, because we can hear these organizations and these famous people all day, but it's people who true survivors that were just like us that speak up.
Yeah.
Like that is what's genuinely encouraging to me, at least.
I know that you said that you want to do mental health counseling. Do you want to like specialize in EMDR therapy or eating disorders or?
My dream right now, and I really hope it stays true, is I would like to open long-term residential treatment center in Arkansas. I genuinely believe that there's going to be a lot of kids like that. There's going to be a lot of less abuse when parents can come visit, like when they can go home, when we can really integrate them back into their state and use ethical ways, because they do. There are kids who really do need to go away for some time. And like we only have, I think, 6 long term. We have quite a few like places that you can stay under 3 months in Arkansas, but bed wise for like longer than 3 months, that doesn't exist. And so that's my dream right now. But definitely the teenage population.
What was
Yeah.
if you don't mind me asking, like, do you know what the youngest person that you saw there, or was there a minimum age?
In eating disorder rehab, there was a 10-year-old there. Boarding school 12.
That's the minimum age, or that's the youngest that you saw?
That was the youngest I saw. I'm sure there was younger at some point.
And did they do adults or up to like 17 or 18-year-olds?
They do. They have like a young adult that I guess like after you turn 18, you can stay there. Because basically, like the kids that were like on the verge of being 18, they're like manipulating the crap out of you because they want you to stay there. So your parents are still putting money in their pocket. Then so a lot of them would eventually check out. They'd be in there, but they would like there was like a transition for young adults where it was like they could go to college half-time and then come do what we were doing there. They had a lot more freedom, but it was a select few that actually stayed in and didn't sign themselves out at some point. Because a lot of people did age to 18 and they would start staying there because what do you have to do? Like your parent, like you can't go back home because your parents are like, you have to stay there till you complete the treatment because they're brainwashing your parents, saying your daughter is trying to manipulate you. Don't listen to anything she says. Then you turn 18 and you're like, I have nowhere to go. What am I going to do? Go live on the streets? Like, I don't even have a proper high school diploma. Like, so they kind of end up stuck there a lot of times.
Is there anything else that you would like to add before we wrap up today?
No, I think that's all. Thanks for letting me speak. You're welcome to cut anything out. I know we spoke for a long time. It's really good.
I'll probably
It's a-
cut some and stuff, but
yeah, that's fine. That's fine.
really good information. I'm also going to be like linking your handle down for people to follow you if you would like. And then I am also going to be having like some hotlines and everything down, and I saw some petitions to be signed that I'll link down below as well. So that way, if you want to look for,
Petitions. Yeah, there's what is the website? I think it's Unsilenced. They have support groups and they have some backpacks on there that they've like been trying to ship out to kids who are survivors that are still on the streets. Just resources for.
yeah, I'm hoping that maybe this episode specifically will, bring people to want to speak out about this as well. For anybody who is listening or watching on YouTube, just know that like you're not alone and there is hope. Like you have someone here, Miss Claire, that if you need to reach out to. She's pretty much a very big advocate for. Sorry, I have a camera over here. Big advocate for teens who are going through this. So I know that this was like probably really fucking hard to talk about, but I like super appreciate it. You're my first guest that I've had, and I'm very thankful for you coming and speaking about this with me. I know it was probably really hard, but it is going to be helpful in a way. So, do you have any questions for me before we stop?
No, thanks so much for having me.
Well, thank you for coming on and speaking about your experiences and everything. I will have everything linked down, and if anybody wants to reach out to Claire, I will have her Instagram handle here. I'm not gonna put your personal self, sorry.
Good. Okay.
So if y'all want to go out and reach out to her, she also gave me some good information of some the what was it called? The group that was like the survivor group of where you were at.
Like, they just have survivor groups in general. If you go to Unsilenced, there's all kinds of TTI survivor groups. If you went to Uinta Academy, there are a few Facebook groups that you can just request to join. Just look up Uinta Academy survivors.
For anyone that just needs to talk to somebody about that, I would love to help if I could, but I don't have a lot of insight, of course, because I wasn't there. But yeah, and if anybody else wants to do an interview for this as well, you can reach out to me too, and I would love to add on and have another guest. But thank you, Miss Claire, for sitting down
Oh,
with me today. You have nothing else that you'd like to add?
no, I'm good. Yes, anybody can definitely reach out and talk, and I can help you. Find some resources that could help you through. Just know you're not alone, that we're all still struggling, even if it's been 15 years later.
Well, thank you, and I hope you have a good rest of your day.
All right. Bye.
If you or anyone you know are struggling and need someone to talk to, please see the emergency hotlines linked in the description below.